to me, success was simply this. It was expressing life and creating these internal and external experiences that provided an unlimited amount of choices.
You just started touching on something which is quite intriguing about the definition of success. And it usually starts going here with most guests. And we start exploring this idea of impact and legacy. Where does that come into your definition?
Success is succession. What I love about this idea is how you've created these internal and external experiences that have created unlimited choices and possibilities. As a result of that success, in this life, in this world, what are you positioning to leave? I believe that we're all put on this planet to actually do something, to have some purpose. We're interconnected and we're here to give and serve and uplift others. Achievement is a part of that. There's nothing inherently wrong about achieving, but in the name of achievement, am I forgetting that I'm creating these experiences? Or do I get so lost in doing that I forget that actually the purpose here is to create these experiences? And so how do you do that? The way I do that is by using
Welcome to another episode of Success with Purpose, where we help mentor you into becoming a more successful version of yourself. We do this through giving you access to mentors you typically would never have the opportunity to connect with. We explore their journeys, their experiences, their life-changing events, their fields of expertise, and most importantly, their purpose. My name is Harry Goldberg, husband to an incredible woman, father of two amazing daughters, host, interviewer, and interrogator of this podcast. And now, just before we learn from yet another exceptional guest, if you find value from these conversations, please make sure to like and subscribe below, leave a review. It really does make a difference. And of course, share it with someone else who's going to find value. Now, listen in, pay attention, take some notes, enjoy. Let's begin. Priya, welcome.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here, Harry.
I'm excited for this conversation. We've been having a lot of conversations recently. I've been involved in one of your groups called Success Stacker, which we'll chat about. For the listeners, Priya's had a pretty interesting journey. I'm keen to explore and dive into it. But her primary role at the moment is a values and mindset and peak parenting coach for Indian parents. But it's not. This is why I'm excited, because it's not just for Indian parents what she has to teach. And it was a non-Indian friend who even introduced me as well. So that's at a company called Success Stacker. A proud wife, a proud mum of two kids as well. And I really want to dive into your journey. But before we do, how do you define success? From your journey and from your life experience and everything that's brought you to where you are right now is ultimately a form of an empowerment coach. How do you define success in the different realms of your life?
I think this is such an interesting question, Harry, because I'm a student of success myself. I've been in the Tony Robbins world for more than 14 years, and I truly believe what he says, that success leaves clues, and that, of course, then always got me to the question of like, what is success? If it leaves clues, what is it, right? And coming from a very strong Indian upbringing, I actually was born and raised in the States. The United States, but I grew up with a lot of tied to my roots, a lot of understanding what my culture was really about, not just the Bollywood and the, good Indian food, but more like what is the depth of the culture and what is the richness that it has to offer and what are the mechanisms of experiencing life that it provides. And I think one of the very interesting things was growing up in the States, but having this really rich background. I actually grew up as a professional Indian classical dancer, a Bharatanatyam dancer. I started dancing when I was 18 months old, and I was deemed professional by one of the toughest panel of critics by the time I was 7. And so in those days, they used to call me a child prodigy. And so I traveled all over the world performing to sold out audiences of 5,000, 6,000 people. And so this immersion into this classical art form, the stories that it tells, traveling all over India to do research for certain projects, performances that we were putting together. And I think for me, I started to develop a very interesting definition of success, right? And I think success was not so much a set of things you do. It was about creating internal and external experiences so that you have unlimited choices. And as I started to experientially understand that idea of success, I started to experience life in a way that one of my mentors, Swami Swarupananda, who is the head of the global Chinmaya mission organization, he says, life gives us an opportunity to express. And I think growing up in this performance art and growing up in a country that allows a lot of expression, I think it was such an interesting experience, because as I started thinking about success at a very young age, all the way till I was about 15, 16, to me, success was simply this. It was expressing life and creating these internal and external experiences that provided an unlimited amount of choices, unlimited choices in what I could do as activities, unlimited choices in where I could go, unlimited choices in who I could become. The Bharatanatyam dance form is a very storytelling art form where you recreate entire, epics with multiple characters, but you're one person representing all the characters. And so, as you begin to explore across time and space, actually, because some of these characters lived almost 7,000 years ago, right? And some of them are a little more modern, right? Maybe a couple hundred years ago. And so, when you traverse through your physiology, through your mind and body, through this physical art form, when you traverse this time and space, you begin to experience things that are a little bit beyond just the normal dimension that we normally come across, right? The art form opened up something very unique for me. And I think the level of immersion and the way I was doing it was absolutely critical in what success meant to me and how that then shaped everything I did after that.
Is that still the same definition of success that you have today?
It's just gotten more amplified, and I've pulled in a lot more people into that as well, because success is really never achieved alone, and this is really one of those beautiful definitions, I believe, that is very inviting of other people, inviting of other experiences. And then really when you get together, success is about possibility, right? And so that's really the earliest shape of success for me.
Okay. And if I dive into that a little bit more, you're talking about creating these internal and external experiences. What does it look like? What's an internal experience by this definition? What's an external experience? And how does that provide unlimited choices?
Yes. So an external experience is what we normally would expect, right? It's traveling, it's eating really interesting foods, maybe delving into the whole foodie realm a little bit, right? It's meeting interesting people. You do this all day long, right? On your show, you're meeting all these interesting people, having conversations with them. It's really looking at that external, what's available to us, like visiting a national park, or taking a road trip, or simply just sitting with nature, right? These are external experiences, and they give you an unlimited amount of choices. Why? What are the choices? The choices are what emotions you will choose to hold as the primary sort of building of your life, right? Like where do you live? And these external experiences give you this a place to live that's full of rich experiences that come from interfacing with all these different possibilities, all these ways of connecting yourself and making a relationship with yourself to something else outside of you, right? So that's the external side. And then the internal
Just
side.
before we
Yes,
reference the internal, just to
yes,
jump in
yes,
there,
yes.
you used the term which I'm quite familiar with, but I think most people aren't. You said,
Okay.
where do you live? Your emotional. I'm assuming you're referring
Ah,
to
yes.
Tony's emotional home, right?
Yes,
Um,
yes, I am. Yes.
can
And
you
where,
elaborate, please?
yes, of course, where you live is obviously in the way I'm using it here, it's not like your physical address, right? Where you live is um we have this body, and we have a consciousness inside this body, and the consciousness is permanent. Even though the body keeps changing from, in order for us to be this kind of form, the baby had to kind of, get destroyed. The form of the baby got destroyed, and from that emerged a child. From the child's body got destroyed and morphed, and from that emerged a teen, and so on and so forth until adulthood. And so, but still, we have a continuous recollection, right? Of, okay, but even though this body has like disappeared and reshaped all the way through, we still have this continuous consciousness that we are still the same entity, right? And so this body that we have, this experience of life through this body, as we move around with that, we have a certain a home, an experience. And that experience, as we travel around in our external environment in this home, has certain features. It's kind of like the interior decorating of, how you move around with this little mobile home, and so this interior decorating is, some rooms might be for yoga, and some rooms might be for an inside garden, and some rooms might be for having a game table, and some rooms might be for karaoke, and some rooms might be for reading. So each place, for example, if you think of a physical home, all those places, they each evoke a particular emotion, right? And so when we construct this little moving home, which is our body and our mind, and we're moving around life with it, I believe that we should have this beautifully decorated place where we can experience all these different emotions inside of us as we move about, right? Because the external circumstances are always changing. So are our internal circumstances. But the beauty of our internal circumstances is we can just add a room to our house and just make it like the best interior design ever, right? In just a second. And all we have to do to really do that is to have connect ourselves to a particular emotion that we define very specifically, right? Beyond just happy, sad, frustrated, mad, beyond just that, developing a rich vocabulary so that we can have a rich and diverse interior design inside of us and experience all those things within the comfort of our own body, within the comfort of the inside, right? I hope that clarified what that means where you live.
Yeah, it does. I'll add to it because it's still a really like esoteric concept for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's this
Yes.
idea that your emotional home is what you keep going back to all the time. Like you keep
Yes.
reverting back to. If you end up finding yourself angry all the time because someone cuts you off in traffic, or because someone cuts the queue at the coffee shop, or because your boss says something that's the wrong thing to say, or because your kid keeps acting up, or whatever it is, you keep finding yourself angry. It's pretty like that's one of the emotional rooms you're talking about in the home. And some people who
Yes.
don't develop their home, they keep going back to that angry room because they don't know where else to go. And so that just
Yeah,
becomes
it's
the
kind of,
emotional home that they've built.
that's right. It's kind of like, I always think of like, that first little apartment you had right out of, college, or, maybe your first job. And it was like this tiny little apartment, and it like really didn't have any amenities or anything nice at all. Like you were lucky if it was a bed, and you were lucky if the bed wasn't like your childhood bed, like it's sort of that, right? It's coming back to this funny makeshift sort of a place. And a lot of times you just don't even know that there are other rooms available that are wide open for you to go and inhabit, right? And so it's becoming aware of that, and then leaving that room, the angry room, and going to other rooms in the house and inhabiting the whole house, not just one room in the house. Yeah.
Yeah,
But yeah,
and choosing which room you go to. Very cool. All right,
that's right.
so
Yeah.
so you've been talking a lot about the external, right? The travel, the foods, meeting interesting people, and going to nature parks and the like. Uh, what about internal? Where's the shift?
Well, internal is well, a lot of your question, addresses the beginning of internal, which is really that emotional home, right? That how do you um, if when we talk about a physical home, if we want a particular kind of look and we say, okay, I'm going to hire one of the top designers to actually come in and help design my space and create this experience. Similar to that, we need someone to help guide the design of our internal experience, right? And so how do we make sure that that the design goes coherently from room to room, that there's some harmony and flow in how everything moves within us. And so that internal experience is really about designing that home, that internal home. It's about having the right people to guide you through that design process, and then to really make the time to not just keep creating, but actually sit and enjoy those spaces within you, right? And because oftentimes you'll get, even in my house, right, there's this one space, it's a consecrated space, and I find myself going there more than any other space in the house, right? But every space has its own feeling and its own connection. And so it's really giving yourself the space and the time and the prioritization to really go and sit in each of those places that you've created. Sometimes those places could be like a feeling of deep connection. And other times those places could be a feeling of deep peace, or joy, or involvement, or excitement, or drive, right? Or passion, and really allowing yourself not just to keep exerting yourself in activity, which is a lot of how achievement works, but truly living in the world of success rather than the world of achievement. And for me, the internal is about consistently checking if what I'm doing as I'm developing the internal experience, is it about activity? Is it about achievement? Or is it about success? And so it's really double checking that and continually bringing into that space the role models that I need to make sure that internal world's experience is very well developed and cultivated.
Okay, and so there'll be people listening to this who will start thinking like, okay, great, you can choose your own internal experience. That's wonderful, but that doesn't necessarily change the environment around you. And a lot of people might be listening, thinking, yeah, but that can kind of just be a cop out. Like it's just it's an escape from your world and your circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
What would you respond to that?
I love this question. And I think for those listeners who have dabbled into anything spiritual, regardless of what your background is, this is a common question that comes up, right? What is the balance between an internal experience and those things that we need to do in the world, right? Like we're all put on this, well, I believe that we're all put on this planet to actually do something, to have some purpose. We're interconnected and we're here to give and serve and uplift others. And so naturally, just saying I'm going to sit and create this internal experience and and then go out and have my external experiences and sit in my own little bubble, that doesn't really work, right? And obviously, like, achievement is a part of that. There's nothing inherently wrong about achieving, like doing things that bring together these two experiences. But where I really regulate myself is, in the name of achievement, am I forgetting that I'm creating these experiences, right? Or do I get so lost in doing that I forget that actually the purpose here is to create these experiences? And so how do you do that? The way I do that is by using values. Now, a lot of times when you say values, like, people don't quite get exactly what a value is. And so the precise definition of a value is any action. And action is defined as any thought, any speech, or any physical activity. Okay, so any action that makes an emotion that you find very energizing. Okay. Something that gives you a lot of energy. Okay. So an energizing emotion feel much bigger to you, right? So any action, like if, for example, if waking up really early and watching the dew, on the plants outside, if watching the dew, which is an action, right? If that makes you feel unlimited amount of, let's just say, like gratitude and wonder for God's creation, well, that's a value. And you might name, different people will name that experience differently. And that's why we all have different values, right? And they're custom built to us and how we choose to name them. Just like when we have kids, we don't name them like numerically or something, right? We literally kind of say, I want to call this child this. And so then we connect to the name, and then the attributes come and match that name. And then we can associate this person and this attributes with the name, right? So it's like this, values are like this. And so how do we connect the internal and the external? The internal is all about an emotional experience, right? This energizing emotions that you've constructed. And that's not to say you don't have de-energizing emotions. They exist. Right. Yep. But in your home, how much of that exists? It might be there, here and there in a corner, or even in one whole room, it might be there. Right. But the majority of the house isn't those de-energizing emotions. And so how do you connect those emotions with the external experience of actions? Right. And so the connection point is really picking up an action, linking it to an emotion, and now you have this seamless experience of life. And every time you do that, you open up a world of possibilities for yourself. And then to me, that's like a moment of success, right? It's like the experience of life itself. When you voluntarily choose to make this connection consciously, every one of those decisions, those choices, is a success moment.
Okay. And when you're talking about energizing emotion, like there are obvious ones which are really energizing, right? Playfulness, excitement, or intrigue, those types of things. And there are very obvious ones which are de-energizing, right? Like the sadness, depression, maybe even anxiety. What about those which give you a lot of energy and push to go forward, like anger, for example? Do you still classify that as an energizing emotion, or is there a slightly different definition?
That's a good question. Anger does give you energy, but I wouldn't say it's necessarily energizing, because it's very fast burning and it's kind of like a sugar rush, right? You consume it and then boom, you kind of have a drop, right? And so it appears to be energizing for a short amount of time, maybe even if the cause is big enough, like some social injustice or something, the anger could even drive you for many months or years. Right? India was at one time ruled by the British, and they had freedom fighters, right, who did use anger as a fuel, right, to overthrow the British rule and to free India from the British rule, right? And so many people used anger to do that, to overcome that. But it's interesting, in the end, the movement that ended up really winning India's independence was Gandhi's movement, which had nothing to do with anger, right? It was all about chilling out, not fighting, right? Not causing injury to anyone. And so like, anger can feel like it's energy. Even sadness can feel like it's energy, because like you just feel like at least you're not stagnating. Something is happening, like Tony always says, Tony Robbins, he always says, progress equals happiness, right? We humans, we think when some kind of progress is happening, some sort of movement is happening. Have you ever tried to drive somewhere and then like the GPS says that this route on the freeway is going to be because it's all red on the map. And then this little side road route is not so red, but then when you compare them to, it's the exact same amount of time. But you jump off the freeway and go on this other little route, because even though it's the exact same amount of time, but you're moving, there's this illusion that we're moving, even though it's going to get you there at the same exact time. Right. And so that experience of that that similar experience is what anger or sadness or even anxiety, it's some kind of movement, some sort of agitation that like moves you forward. And it's not real. It's not really energizing. It's not sustainable. And you will feel the absolute, like, how do you say, like the crash from that. You will feel the crash from that. And the crash from that often leaves you feeling things like regret, guilt, shame, remorse. Like, that's what the crash looks like usually.
Yeah.
Right.
Intriguing for me to hear that, because I realized that when I link that back to your definition of success, you're talking about unlimited choices. And the likes of anger or anxiety or stress or frustration don't tend to give you unlimited choices. They give you more choices. You can do more, right? You got more energy, at least for a short time, but not unlimited choices.
And I like to think of those as fuel sources. There's absolutely nothing wrong with all of those all of those emotions. They all have some amount of fuel. But if we wanted to have this amazing bonfire experience with our kids on a camping, right? We don't want to burn a fire that's going to burn super hot and super fast, and then they don't have the time to like enjoy all the making of the marshmallows and watching everything melt and really getting into the stories. And if we just throw fast burning wood in there, that thing's going to just burn and it's going to be done. And it's going to be too hot. It won't be that nice, warm, toasty, fireside experience, right? So we really want to choose the right fuel to create that experience of that warm, nice, on a totally frigid night, this nice, warm, toasty marshmallow experience. Yeah.
And then sometimes we do want the bigger fire. Sometimes we want the fireworks, and we need a different fuel source.
Sometimes we do. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. Right? But then it goes back to the question of value. Do we really consider those hot burning things valuable, that we want to hold it and save it? Like, it's like diamonds, you kind of buy a diamond, or maybe it's like a 20th wedding anniversary gift or something. And, you hold that, you keep that. Maybe it's so special and meaningful that you may want to pass it on for generations, right? Is that the kind of thing when we're burning hot and going that way? Are we looking to save and pass something on? Right. And so it really then comes down to, how often do you want to burn the fuel hot and fast? Because what are you really saving to pass on, right? Is it really valuable? Are you increasing the value by engaging in that frequently?
So you just started touching on something which is quite intriguing about the definition of success. And it usually starts going here with most guests. And we start exploring this idea of impact and legacy. Where does that come into your definition?
Oh, it's such a good question. One of my favorite quotes is by John C. Maxwell. And he says, success is succession. Okay. Success is succession. And what I love about this idea is, as a result of the way you live your life, right? In my definition, it's as a result of how you're successful, right? How you've created these internal and external experiences that have created unlimited choices and possibilities. As a result of that success in this life, in this world, what are you positioning to leave, right? What are you succeeding? Like, is it that, and what's beautiful about this thought is, it's not just like, oh, I built this really amazing business that touched, 10 million people. Like, it's not only those things. Those things are good, right? And important and nice, but it's not those things. It's every moment where your succession became so clear. It's that moment where you notice that the teller at the supermarket doesn't seem to be quite on. Right? Like, maybe this is a supermarket you go to all the time and you've seen this teller before, and they're usually this like mega greeter kind of person, right? They're like, oh, Miss Narthakii, how are you? And how are your kids? And she like knows more about you than, like your family members know about you, right? She's really involved and invested. But maybe one day you go there and you notice, well, something's a little off. Like, she's not her normal greeting self. She's not doing the bubbly, connection thing. Like, and it's that, succession is like, are you strong enough in your internal experience to take that opportunity to open up the possibility to that person to say, hey, I noticed that, your greeting was a little different today. Maybe today you need me to greet you. And you take a moment, you stop whatever you're doing, you put your phone down, you put whatever down, and you mirror what normally you receive from that person, right? And in that one small moment, that's a success, right? And that's a succession. It's not only did that person remember, but everyone standing around you in the line, right? Everyone standing around you, even if they're not paying attention, somehow in their subconscious, that moment, your mark has been left. There's some moment. And so looking at every moment as like, in this moment, my energy was left here, and the pulsation of that energy is going to touch people in this environment, right? And so living your life as a succession moment. And of course, in my own work, which as you introduced, I'm a peak parenting coach. So for me, this extends into succession in the form of how we develop children to live as if their life is about creating this legacy of succession, right? By adopting this definition of success, by anchoring themselves to values, and through that values mindset, constantly looking for ways to create this succession, to create this moment where your leadership triggers somebody else's leadership, right? And I'll tell you a really interesting story about where this actually came from, this idea of succession. And it's actually a story about my brother. And my brother had Down syndrome. And about 9, almost 10 years now ago, he passed away. And he passed away at the age of 27. And growing up with him was a really, really amazing experience, because one of the things that had happened, and I do also want to say, even though I had all these very unique experiences, and I had formed my ideas of what success was very early, this definition of success was there from about, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 years old. And then I consciously really understood this definition until I was about 15, 16. Okay. And at that moment, I started to look around the world, and I started, even though my parents didn't care about this at all, which is very unusual for Indian parents, but I started to look around, and I started to see people who had impressive titles and impressive resumes and impressive jobs, and, just all the things that young people who look out externally and like, they think, oh, I want all that cool stuff. Like, that must be what life's about. And again, even though my parents never really like wanted those things for me, I somehow got it in my head right around 16 that in order to be valuable in the world, in order for people to respect me and consider me somebody important in the world where this succession would matter. And I kind of was getting a taste of that, right? Because I was a very famous child dancer. Okay. Like super famous. Like I was on the cover of newspapers every couple of weeks, and I was super famous. Like I was one of those people that you would go to the local grocery store, and like little kids would be like, in Indian language, you address people a little formally. They would call me big sister, which is akka or didi in our language. And they would run up and they'd be like, Priya didi, can you sign this picture? And they would literally bring photographs, and I would sign it. And if I went to the temple, there would be like this huge crowd of little kids who would like literally try to touch me because they thought touching me would like somehow transfer something, So I grew up very much like, a celebrity, and I truly saw what that opened for people, like what that opened as opportunities, right? I would get tickets to things and, be invited to things. And, it was a very interesting experience growing up as a child that way. But right around 16, there was some kind of connection of like, oh my goodness, like this access, this, how people look at you, like what they consider as like modelable and all that stuff. It's all linked to this achievement. It's all linked to this, like being impressive and doing all these extraordinary things. And so now I have to go out and rack up all those things. right? And I literally made a decision, which actually took me away from my definition of success for a little while. And I went on and I racked up all these crazy things. I got 4 university degrees. I got 5 certifications, each one like 2 years each. I did Vipassana meditation for 25 years. I did pranic healing. I did, yoga. I became a certified yoga teacher, doing pranayama. The list goes on, right? Like, I mean, really, if you'd looked at my resume, by the time I was 24, I had done more than what most people do in probably 2 lifetimes. And I traveled to almost 63 countries. So, by the time I was like 25, 26, I had racked all this up. And the more I racked up and the further I got away from my real core success definition, the more agitated I began to feel. Okay, now there's one very lucky thing that happened to me through this whole process, and that was my brother. And the way my parents raised my brother. And what was so beautiful about that was that their entire focus of raising him wasn't about racking up achievements. It wasn't about that for me either. I decided that. They just supported it because I was so driven. But it wasn't about that. For them, it was about how beautiful his character was and allowing a full expression of that. And again, all the external and internal experiences that he would need. These 63 countries I went to because they wanted to give him that external experience. Right. And so I got to tag along and go and do all this with them, and he had all kinds. I mean, my mom found programs that were like unheard of. Back then, there was no internet to find these, programs and things, right? She literally had to network and find these opportunities. And she found things like, at one point, I remember sitting in an airplane with him, and he was the pilot. He was flying an airplane, right? And he was maybe 15, 16 years old flying an airplane. And so they had all these amazing programs. And my parents found every single one of those, put him in everything, gave him this incredible experience of life, right? And in each of those situations, what was extraordinary was that for him, it was all about connecting with people at the deepest level. Like he could get people to like reveal things that were just, that you would never tell anyone. Like you might not even tell your therapist, you would never tell anyone, but somehow they would just spill stuff to him and then just embrace him. And just stay there, like just their whole body would just melt and relax. And, and then he would just be embracing them for, 5, 6, 7, 10 minutes. He would embrace people, and it was this like, just this enveloping of like radiating love and character and beauty in this human. And so this contrast was so vital, because without this contrast, I would have never returned back to my definition of success. And, it's interesting, when he was alive, I did find wonder every time this would happen. And so many experiences with myself when you're on the path of achieving, so many things go up and down for you, up and down, up and down. Every disappointment is every failure is like a big giant end of the world thing. And every success is some rooftop thing. And it's so tumultuous, that experience of achievement. And especially those times when I would hit the bottom, I remember just, he would say, Akka, which in my language means older sister, come. And he would just sit down and he would put me in his lap. He would put my head in his lap and he would just rub my head. And he would say nothing. It was just this beautiful experience of what a beautiful character looks like. And then I appreciated it, but I didn't quite connect the dots at that moment. But then at 27, when he died, there was this most extraordinary thing that happened. We just made a simple post on Facebook to let people know he had passed on. And hundreds of people started reaching out, started sending little letters, notes. Like people flew in from, college and other places to attend his funeral. And well, his funeral was in India because he passed actually while they were visiting India. But when we came back, we had a memorial for him, and people flew in from all over. There were people that we didn't even know that had come to this, and one person after another, after another, after another. And everything was like, Sumi changed my life. Sumi showed me that like I'm good enough to go to college. Like Sumi showed me that, I can like, try out for the basketball team. I'm talking neurotypical people, right? Not other Down syndrome people. I'm talking neurotypical people, right? And just all the things like Sumi showed me how to love, and I found my spouse because I learned to love from Sumi. It was just wild, the things people said. And I was like, and in that moment, at that memorial, I was like, what am I doing? What am I doing? Like, where did I go wrong? Like, what happened to me? And he said, this is success. Success is about succession. And here is a role model that literally I was immersively living with. And I didn't quite see every bit of succession that I could have modeled. And so I made it my mission to just relive all those, whatever I had experienced, those beautiful memories of succession. And like, I made a commitment to myself that I'm going to leave off all this unnecessary chasing achievement. Achievement will come if you go back to this idea that success is an experience. It's an internal, external experience that's about succession. So anyway, I'll pause there. It's a long story, but that was a significant milestone.
It's a beautiful, beautiful story, because most people would not expect someone with Down syndrome, almost always dependent on parents, to ever really be the role model that they need in life. And success does leave clues, and not always in the areas that we expect it, right?
Yes. Yes.
This is, I feel like the people who are listening have a pretty good sense of who you are, and now I want to start understanding more of your journey. So you were a child prodigy from when you were young, and you went up to the ranks, and you were professional when you were 7 years old, and all that kind of stuff, right? You kept going, and you obviously were doing very well at 15, 16, and you pursued even more of this achievement, right? And you started doing university degrees and getting more awards and accolades and whatever achievements you could have. What was one of like the first kind of career focused decisions you made after dance? Or what led you to leaving dance? I assume you're not still a professional dancer, I'm guessing.
Unfortunately, well, I do still support like students in their learning whenever. My mom actually runs a large dance school, and so when she needs support, I still support with choreography and some student things. But actually, I left performance because I actually had an injury, which was very severe, and I couldn't continue the same way I had. The performance practice rigor was almost 6 to 8 hours a day you have to practice, and it was just too much on the injury to try to recover and also maintain the schedule and also be traveling for performance. So I left dance because of an injury, like many professional athletes tend to at some point undergo some sort of injury usually, but that's kind of why I left dance. And I think part of growing up in this way, knowing that the world is an endless amount of choices, I had never thought that dance would be my only career. I truly believed, like as early as probably 5 or 6, I believed that I'm going to have like 4 full-time careers because I can do everything. And my parents really supported that idea. But by contrast, what was very interesting was the Indian community right around the age of 16, 17-ish. The Indian community, we have these little get-togethers, at people's homes, and like a lot of Indians come and we eat dinner and we hang out. And it always ends up that any kind of teenage, almost college-going person is sort of, kind of trapped by all these We call them aunties and uncles. They're basically, community members that we they're not real aunties and uncles, yeah, but we call them aunties and uncles. We treat them with that sort of respect, and so they kind of crowd around you and trap you on a couch or somewhere, and they're like, "What are you going to do for college? And what are you going to be? And did you do your apps? And da da da." And like every last little question that they could possibly ask, and they want to all be involved and make sure you're going to do everything right and everything's fine, right? And I remember this one party that happened, this little dinner party that happened. And there was this one auntie, and I remember sitting on this brown couch. It was this overly soft brown couch. And we were sitting there, and this auntie had so much concern and so much like good intention. And she was sitting there and she was like, Priya, like, we know you've grown up very famous and all this kind of stuff. And, though, that like when you go to college, it'll be too demanding. You're going to have to give up all this dance and everything. Right? You're going to have to pick just one thing, you can't do all of this and then also be successful there. And of course, like in that moment, I can tell you, I didn't go to a very energizing place, right? In that moment, I was like, who the hell are you to tell me I can't do something, right? Like in that moment, I just felt so much like resistance. I could feel that resistance within me. I was like, no, like, I don't believe that. Like, that is not real. That is not true. Like, my own parents aren't telling me that. Like, who are you to tell me that? Who are you to put a cap on what I can be or what my choices are? Hell no, right? And but of course, I didn't show any of that. Being a very skilled dancer, I was able to keep that all inside. And I said, auntie, I don't know. Like, I really appreciate you, bringing it up, and it's something I'll think about. And I remember that night just making that decision of like, no way. Like, I'm going to show this whole community, especially this auntie, wrong. Like, that's a wrong belief that should not be shared with other people. And I'm going to prove that belief wrong. And so I had already decided at that age that and in that time, being so influenced by my brother and in the 80s, there wasn't a lot of resources and facilities and things like that, like communities, not so much facilities, but communities for adults with Down syndrome. And so I had decided that I'm going to be a doctor, and that I was going to open this large center for Down syndrome in various parts of the world, with the headquarters being in India for adults with Down syndrome, because there were some resources for kids, but none for really.
Was this before or after? Sorry, was this before or after your injury that took you out of dance?
This was before my injury. Yeah. This was right around 16, 17. My injury happened at about 25, 26. So
and was that before
yeah.
Or after your brother passed away?
And my brother passed away when I was 33, 34.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, just to give the chronology of it. Each of these was like 10 years apart, this moment. And so at that moment, I had already decided, I'm going to do this thing and I'm going to build this thing. And actually at the time, my vision was my brother could be, one of the key people in that place. And by the time I get it going, he'll be an adult and he could run some programs and things. I like figured in some roles for him and all that. I'm pretty sure he wouldn't have agreed to any of those roles because that wasn't his mode of succession. But I had thought about all that, and I went on, I was on that achiever's path, right? Like, I was recruited out of high school by a university. I went to university. I finished everything. Like, I finished high school in 3 years. I finished 2 degrees of college in 3 years. I finished 2 master's degrees in a year. And so I was just on this mission to get to that dream as quickly as possible, right? I got into medical school, took the MCAT, studied everything, got into medical school, deferred for a year because I wanted to learn the business, because I was like, I'm going to open the center. Like, it's not going to cut it for me just to know how to be a doctor. I'm going to have to also know the administrative side and all that. And in that journey of learning all that administrative side and all that, I realized, I don't think I really want to it's not just about the Down syndrome community. It's about healing people. It's about giving people possibility, right? And I used to believe that the best way to give people possibility was you take away anything that's distracting them. And one of the biggest distractions is any health issues, right? If you have a health issue, you're not really thinking about the possibilities. You're just trying to fix your health issue. It's very, very challenging, and so I naively used to believe that if you solve someone's health issue, then obviously, like, they will then, have this beautiful emotional home, and they'll make possibilities and, nothing else is needed. We just remove this physical barrier and boom, it just connects, right? Well, I was like 16, so I didn't quite get that's not how it really works.
You can get people out of a hole, but that doesn't put them at the top of the mountain. They're two different things.
No. Yeah. But I didn't really understand that, right? I was like, because in my experience, it was like, okay, like when I'm dancing and then I overdo it and my knee locks or something, like I go to the therapy, they fix my knee, boom, I'm back to my form. I'm good, right? So my experience of that was like, that's how it must be for everyone, and I quickly realized going through that path, especially when I deferred my admission to learn the administrative side of things, I said, oh my goodness, there are more things. Like if I take away the body thing, there's all this administrative stuff. Like there's how the insurance company is doing. Now they're going to be saddled by money, right? Because of the bills, and how the healthcare system is structured. So I said, oh gosh, like, okay, like, there's lots of people to do the body work. Like a lot of my friends had already become doctors, right? And I was like, okay, I can partner with them. I don't have to be a doctor. I can partner with the doctors. Let me focus on removing this money problem or this bill problem or whatever. So I started, consulting for some of the top 5 consulting firms in the country, and started working in the healthcare space, started working in the insurance space. And then I got into like business strategy and transformation, because I was like, okay, well, we can fix all these little systems, but it's the leaders and like what they're deciding that's impacting the people. So maybe if I work at that layer and I can influence something about the strategy or how they think about something, maybe that will unbind people as they go through this process. And I went through a lot of different layers of that process for almost 7 or 8 years. I was in more than that, I think, maybe 9 years. I was in consulting, and I saw all the various layers, and consultants are like literally the cream of the crop, right? They have the absolute most cutting edge, best things. Like it's literally the 1% of the country's minds are consultants, like consulting to these big CEOs and everything. And I was on those teams of like maybe 6 to 8 people that would interface directly with the CEO and the CXO team to kind of fashion the strategies, right? And we wouldn't do any implementation, it would only be the strategy side. And as I started going through this experience, I was like, no matter how much we change this, it won't make people like just explode with possibility. It won't matter how much of this we fundamentally change. And it was right around then that my son was born. Right around that point. I realized within the first year, like, I had a traveling nanny, because as a consultant, you travel like 5 days a week. You're basically a road warrior. And so the clients loved me so much that they paid for my live-in nanny so that I could work for them. And so, and not only did they pay for her, they paid for her suite also, because she had her own suite and I had my own suite. And oh yeah, it was it was amazing. And so and then I would be in these meetings, and she would send me these texts of like my son's first steps, my son's first word, which by the way wasn't amma, which means mother. It was Priya. Okay. Like I was like, oh no. Right. Like that's wild. Like she's calling me Priya. I mean, he's calling me Priya. What is he calling her? The nanny. Right? I was like, no. Meanwhile, I'm the one pumping the milk and sending it to the hotel, right? To get the baby fed. And I'm like, no. I have earned that title. Right. And so
how old were you when your son was born?
I was 29. Yeah, I was 29 when he was
Yeah.
born. And he just had his 14th birthday, actually,
And
a
so it
few days
sounds like
back.
when you got into the consulting area, that was shortly after your injury.
Correct. Shortly after my
Yeah.
injury.
Okay.
Yes.
Cool.
And so anyway, I just started to experience these things, and I was like, I made a decision to have this child. It wasn't, we planned it. And that's another very funny story, because growing up, I never wanted to have children. I never understood why people have children. Like, what is the point of that? Like, I was that 16-year-old where all the other 16-year-olds were like, I'm going to marry Johnny and we're going to live da da da. And, we're going to have 2.5 kids. And I was like, ew, why? So I was that weird person who had like zero maternal instincts, and it's a long story why I ended up having a child, actually, which I'm sure we'll get to. But I ended up, it was a leap of faith, and I ended up having my son. And it really did shape my entire destiny, becoming a mother and having him. And so at that moment, as I watched him develop, I was like, you know what? This whole healthcare space, this whole trying to give people possibilities through this avenue, through the healthcare avenue, I don't think that that's really going to work. By this point, I had explored pretty much every avenue, right? I'd worked on the hospital side, I'd worked on the provider side, I'd worked on the insurance side, I'd worked on the business side. I had worked with the top people, right? With the leaders. And I was like, this isn't going to make them just explode for possibilities. Right. So I walked into work one day. I quit without telling my husband, my, at the time, very much 6-figure job. Right. And I said, you know what? I'm just going to immerse in my son, and I'm going to focus on all the peak performance things to cultivate him as, with all the peak human development performance disciplines in the world. I'm going to fuse them all. I'm going to raise this child in a totally different way. And that whole sentiment lasted about 3 months before I went totally berserkly crazy. And then my husband was like, you say you're all about the possibilities and you want to be more flexible and you still want to do something that serves people. In addition to raising our son, why don't you go and get certified in yoga? Because, yoga people are all about opening the possibilities, opening their body, opening their heart, and so I said, okay. I'd always done yoga as part of my dance training. And I was like, okay, that sounds good. Yeah, I'll do that, become formally trained. And I went and I did that. And as I did that, I realized how unbelievably disconnected most of that world was from really opening up possibilities at a very deep level. They were opening up possibilities, but it wasn't at the level I was looking for. So I did that for about 2 or 3 years. And then after that, my husband suggested, you've always been excellent at mentoring people. When you were in corporate, you did so great at mentoring people. Why don't you take Tony Robbins' coaching certification? Like get certified in his coaching methods. And at that time, coaching as a career was kind of just coming up. It wasn't it was 13, 14 years ago. It wasn't like today, where everyone even knows what a coach is, right? Most people do know what a coach is today. So this was at a time when people didn't know what a coach was, and like, why would you do that? And of course, my Indian community, my parents never say anything, but my Indian community was like, what's that? You did all this stuff and now you're going to be what, a coach? And I, for a moment, I felt like I was back in that soft brown couch with that auntie, like, what do you mean? I'm going to prove that coaching is like a thing, but luckily I had become more integrated and I didn't need to prove anything. And I remember taking the course. And another interesting thing that happened at this moment, which was my marriage was going through significant trouble. We were constantly fighting every day. We were on the brink of divorce several times. We had agreed to go to family and marriage counseling, which we were doing, but it wasn't really like we were both showing up. We both wanted to make it work, but it wasn't really doing anything. And then we would literally like, because we had a strict rule against fighting in front of my son. We lived in Illinois and we had this basement, right? And so we would like have enough self-discipline to put on a big show for him and everything. And the moment he would go to sleep, we would go down to the basement and it'd be like a yelling match. You know, you would think that there was like a fight club down there, you know, and it was just awful, you know, not physically, but, you know, verbally just going back and forth. And it was just a horrible situation we'd allowed our marriage to get into. And when he suggested, why don't you do this Tony Robbins, a big part of me, because I had started to live in an emotional home that was just one room that didn't have other possibilities, right? And I'd been doing that for a couple of years. And when he said, why don't you do this? And I was like, you know what? I don't know that I'm going to be able to help people get possibilities anymore. Like, I don't think I can do that anymore from where I'm at, but at least I can try to get it back for myself. And so I really treated that Tony Robbins program as like a complete revital. I took full responsibility for myself. And I said, this program, I'm going to be my first client and I'm going to like fully apply this stuff to me. And at that point, when I took it, I didn't know if I would even do coaching. I really just took it because I felt that I needed to have a coach and, you know, and learn the skills to work on myself over and over again. And so that's really what happened. And through that program, I ended up finding out I had a remarkable talent for coaching. And so when I came out, all of my teachers and mentors in the program said, it's an absolute must that you have to start a coaching business. Like, you cannot just go and say, I did this for myself. You cannot. And I had some wonderful mentors who really pushed me and said, do the mentoring program, start your business. And I did. And it was like just a beautiful experience. And I was able to open all the doors to all the rooms again and inhabit, and my marriage started improving like significantly as a result of that program. And Tony's program is not like for the faint of heart. It's a very grueling, intense program, 100 hours. And if you do more certification levels, it's like 200 hours. And it's not like, like watch a video and fill out a worksheet. It's not that kind of work. It's very intense. And so you have to really just immerse yourself in that. As this all started unfolding and opening up and I found myself face to face with that exact thing I had always decided I wanted to do, which was be in a space where I could open possibilities for people. And my mother, being a mother, was opening possibilities for my child. You know, working on myself was opening possibilities for my marriage. And, like working as a coach was opening possibilities. And so I had somehow found my way back to this definition of success.
Where was you were sharing about how impactful and how pivotal the moment was when, like, your brother's memorial, when he passed away. When was that during this process?
The memorial was my son was about 4, so it was right when I was like about halfway through the Tony program.
Okay, so it's right at the same time.
Yeah,
amazing.
right around. Or no, I think no. I had just finished the Tony program. Just graduated. And yes, it was 2013 when my brother passed, and I had just graduated. Yes, I had just graduated from the program, and I did something wild. I wrote my very first book and published it that same year, the year that he died. Yeah.
Okay. And there's, like, obviously there was that, plus all these mentors of yours who are starting to say, like, you must do coaching, you got to set up the business, you got to create this impact, you're writing the book, and everything in your life is changing. That might be an interesting one for a lot of the listeners. Specifically, you're talking about how your marriage was in a really bad place. Like, you were staying together, probably more so because of external pressure or thinking you got to stay for the kids and that kind of
Yes.
stuff, rather than actually wanting to be. Um, share as much detail as you're able to, but how
Yes.
did you how did the marriage get to that kind of stage? And then what did you, it sounds like most of the change was from your side, you changed, and then that influence changed in him and back and forth and whatever. But what were the actual changes that happened that transformed the relationship?
Well, actually, it's a little different than what you just said there.
Okay.
So, what got us to that place was, see, in the Indian culture, we have two ways of that people can get married. One way is what we call a love marriage, which is what the Western world is familiar with. You meet someone, you fall in love with them, you date them for a period, and then it has a natural progression where a proposal is made, and then you get married. Another system is the arranged marriage system, where your parents, find a suitable family, suitable match. There are many factors which are considered, and then an alliance is made, and then you get an introduction to that person. You get to know them, but not the way you get to know them in a Western situation. It's a little bit more like. Do you remember like the Victorian times where you would have a chaperone and you would court somebody, and it's kind of like what we read in Jane Eyre or something like that, or Pride and
Right.
Prejudice or something like that. It's something like that. It's a little bit more supervised, formal. Your parents wouldn't be there, but like maybe your cousin would accompany you, or somebody would come with you, and you weren't meeting with this person alone, and there was protocols for that and such. So you would get to know them, but it was a little bit more organized, right? A little more supervised. And so my husband is actually an immigrant. I was born and raised here, but he was born and raised in India. And he came to the United States when he was around 20 or 21 years old to work. And he got this amazing job, and he made the decision to leave everything and be an immigrant and come here. And I met him about 4 or 5 years after he had been here. Right, I think he was about 26 when I met him. I was 25, and when we met, one of the things that had happened was that his parents really wanted a traditional setup, right? They wanted to, do an arranged marriage, and in fact, my husband has a younger brother, and he did an arranged marriage, right? Even after our story and everything, he went the arranged marriage route, and she's a lovely, lovely. My sister-in-law is this lovely girl, and so they did this. They had really always just thought, he's a little more traditional. Like, we were expecting him to do the arranged marriage. So which was a little funny because even before he we met through a dating app, because back in that day, the dating apps were like just new, and it was like this cool thing to do. And actually my dad was like, 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 you have all these achievements, and like you make a lot of money and stuff. Like, who are we going to get for you? Who you, like, no one's going to be qualified to like be with you. And I was like, I don't know. Like, let's not stress out too much. And he's like, well, my friend's daughters, cousins, whatever, is on this online thing. I'm like, Dad, come on. Being online is like for losers, for like ugly people, like who have no personality, because that's what the world of online dating was back then, and I was young, and I was like, oh, come on, I'm not going to be online. He's like, it worked for Deepika's daughter. It's not, you just try it, And I was like, okay, Dad, I'll try it, like, I'll just shut you up and I'll try it. My dad, worked for a very large pharmaceutical company, and for 26 years in a row, he was the number one salesman of that company. He was in pharmaceutical sales, and so it's very hard to like go up against a salesman of that nature, and try to convince him that you're not going to go on this dating site, right, on this online thing. So I set up my profile, and I went online, and I actually met Ramesh through one of those. And the funny thing was, right before Ramesh even posted his profile. He had made a visit back home to India, and he asked them, he said, if I find a girl of my own choosing that's like has our background and all that kind of thing, is it okay if I choose her and you don't choose her, so long as she fits all the like traditional things you're looking for? Is that okay? Well, the thing was, they never really imagined in a million years that there would be a girl like that in America, right? Like they were like, oh, I don't think so. Sure, yeah, you can do that. Because I don't think they didn't want to like shut him down, but then they didn't really think that that would be possible, because like who's going to have that many traditional parameters, like raised in a foreign country, right? Like they just didn't think that was possible, right? So they said, okay. Well, he comes back, and within 2 weeks we meet. He puts his profile up with his parents' permission. Within 2 weeks of him putting the profile up, we meet. And at that time, I had moved to Boston to take a really interesting opportunity at Harvard Boston Children's Hospital. And he was working in Boston as a consultant. And so we met, and it was just like, it was literally, I never believed, because I had dated a lot, and I never believed in a million years that you could have like love at first sight. I never believed that. And I literally, like, he came to pick me up that first night, and I looked into his eyes and I was like, this is the one. I was like, wait, Priya, calm down. You can't just look at someone and say this is the one, right? But there was just something so soulful about him, something so true and authentic and real about him. And we dated only for like 2 weeks, and then he proposed marriage. So we called his parents, and we called my parents, and my parents were like super excited, and his parents were like, what? Like, no, we're not doing that. Like, they didn't even know anything about me, and they just said no, because they were like, oh, she's from there. No. And so then that led to a whole bunch of weird things. Just like them really trying to stall setting a date, like supporting the marriage. And, they just couldn't wrap their head around this choice, because they never really thought it would happen. And it took several months to kind of bring them here, and and kind of expose them, and even on the day we got married, they were not supportive. They didn't want it to happen. And so that family friction was the beginning of this really epic union, like starting to deteriorate, because one of the very big values we both had was that he would treat my parents like his own, and I would treat his parents like my own. And it was hard to do that because they were so angry. And even though we would try, they like didn't want to do it. Right about a year into our marriage, my brother-in-law introduced our whole family to probably the most important person that I would ever meet in my whole life. And this person is a self-realized spiritual teacher who lives in India, who lived in India. And his name is R. Seshadri. And I used to call him like grandfather. That was like my pet name for him, which in my language is Tata. And so I met, Seshadri Tata, or we used to call him Periyavar Tata. So I met him, and it was like something absolutely, some layer of karma, or some layer of energetic imprint from some previous life was just lifted. Like some tension, some stress, some sort of discord. Like, it was just the moment I met him, something just lifted. And I just knew in that moment that this man was going to change the rest of my life. And I literally, I was not that type, because I was super, super, like questioning. And I was raised in America. Like, I asked all the questions. I said, why this and why that? And what, when you're raised in India, you don't ask as many why questions, at least in that generation. Now it's changed. People ask why. But in my generation, people didn't ask, when you were raised in India, you didn't ask 100 whys about everything. Like, why do we, rotate the lamp? Like, why do we put this thing on our forehead? Why? I grew up asking all the whys and finding all the scientific reasons for them too. And in that moment, I had never, without inquiry, without diving deep and learning and going deep, I had never just said, I fully believe and trust, and whatever you say, I'll just do. I never had done that with anything in my life. And in that moment, I was like, whatever you say, I'll do. And he was just this old soul that was so deep and wise, and just you could feel like the oneness like emanating from him, and there was something highly right about his presence, and you could just feel it, like just being near him, you could just feel it pulsating through your whole body. And he said, this union was made in a very special way. This union was made for, you've had past lives together. You've never been able to reconcile. You've had differences in those lives too. You've never been able to reconcile those differences. But this is a special life, because what you've agreed to, you'll be able to open up those possibilities. And he used those exact words. And I was like, oh my God, ding, 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 ding. Like, and in that moment, I started to see the purpose of marriage very differently. It was about serving a higher leader, about serving a higher purpose and mission in life. And luckily, one of the things that was very important to both Ramesh and I was this connection with spiritual leaders, self-realized people, our scriptures. This was very, very important to us. And there was a moment where we were in the company of Perivar Tata for a few years. And there was this moment where Perivar Tata said, that, every time I would go and meet him and I would say, okay, Perivar Tata, what am I supposed to do now? Like, what's the next step for me? Like, tell me and I'll go do it. And he'd say, well, you have to have a baby now. And I was like, wait, what? Like, no. Like, no, we're not doing that. And he was like, nope, that your higher purpose, like being in alignment with me and other gurus who have come before me, like being in alignment with these leaders and with your highest purpose that God's designed for you is all wrapped up around this child. You must have this child. And I literally resisted him for more than like a year and a half. I resisted, and I was like, no, I'm not doing that. And one fine day he just said, okay, it's okay. Then just don't. Here's the last date. If you don't do it by this date, just don't do it. And I was like, wait, what? What does that mean? Does that mean if I do it after the date, like the child will grow up to be like a serial murderer? Like, why? Why can't I do it after this date? Like, I don't understand. But I could feel the truth of it. And so he gave us a date, a blessed date. And we tried on that date, and we conceived on that date. And that was the day that, then my son came to be. And meanwhile, a lot of this turmoil and things were happening, but my in-laws were also under the guidance of Perivar Tata, and something opened and changed in them. So honestly, the marriage started getting better truly because of them. They changed, they became open to me, and started like calling me and inviting me to spend time with them and come to India more. And they offered to come here. And it was really, I have so much respect for my in-laws, because to be that age, to be, going through everything, and then to suddenly change everything and open yourself in that way is to me what being an elder is really about. It's that knowing how to, navigate yourself that way, which many elders don't have that. And once they started doing that, I always wanted to love them and show them my love. So they started to get to know me a little bit without the biases of, well, you're not really raised here. And then pretty soon they came to discover, damn, like she's more cultural than any girl we could have seen here. You know, like she's like definitely, you know, somebody we would have picked. In fact, she's better because she speaks to us openly. She shows us affection. Like she makes things for us. She buys things for us. She creates experiences for us. Like she's much more than any normal daughter-in-law we could have found, you know, in India. And so that really opened a window. And, you know, earlier when you said, doing this Tony Robbins work really shifted me. And so my change shifted him. Actually, that's not really how it happened. How it happened was my husband, was incredibly determined to, because Perivartata had said that this is an epic union, he was incredibly determined to wait as long as it takes for that epic union part to express itself. And no matter what I would scream or say to him, or no matter what I would do, he would just be like, well, he would fight back. He wasn't, you know, this meek little wallflower, but he would never make it an option to leave. He would never threaten. Like I was the one who was like, I'm going to leave and I'm going to, you know, get a divorce. Da, da, da. He would be like, okay, if that's what you want to do, I'll come with you. Right? Let's go together. to the divorce attorney, and I'll help you. Like we'll even fill the forms together. You know, like it was this tenacity of belief in the possibility of what Perivartata said we were made for, you know, and what we were destined to be together. And he never, not for one single second, did he let go of that perspective. And the more I transformed, I started to see like, wow, what an amazing experience of success. Like he's building success in this marriage. He's opening up possibilities just simply by being tenacious and believing in these words of Perivartata and just holding that as his truth, having faith to drive him. And eventually through the program, you know, I was able to structure something for us and suggest, because I think he had that tenacity, but he didn't know how to structure us to move forward, right? And because I was doing the Tony program, I was able to offer what the structure might be. And I said, you know, why don't we make, you know, we've always done a blend of our cultures together, right? In the Western world, marriage is about, you know, a man and a woman coming together and, you know, finding the one and serving each other and looking madly into each other's eyes and, you know, and just feeling absolute bliss and connection. And that's like your forever person. And, you know, it's this sort of like the princess story, right? It's that sort of model of that. And every little girl growing up here kind of, whether Disney changes their methods or not, like we all kind of grow up with that sort of picture of like what marriage should be about, you know, and what that connection is about. I'm not saying that's right. It's somewhat delusional, but you know, it's just part of, you know, this sort of imagination that young girls go through. But in India, the imagination is very different. The imagination in India isn't about a husband and a wife, a man and a woman serving each other. In India, marriage is about two people coming together to open a family. It's about serving the elders. In fact, in India, until very recently, maybe only 50 years, your in-laws lived in your home with you. You moved to your in-laws' home. Your husband didn't have his own home. They had a home, which was a very nice home because they were old, right? And your husband lived there and you moved to their home. And this is the traditional structure. And you would serve them. And, you know, if relatives came, you would take care. Cousins come, you take care. You know, you become what they call Mahalakshmi. Mahalakshmi is the Hindu goddess of wealth. And when a daughter-in-law comes into the house, she's named as the source of the greatest wealth the family has ever experienced. And she's treated that way, or she should be treated that way in ancient cultures. That's the way she's supposed to be treated. And she, in return, conducts herself like Mahalakshmi, and wealth isn't just money. Wealth is progeny. Wealth is emotions. Wealth is, family connections. Wealth is, grains, food, managing food, cooking food. Wealth has many layers, and this is what the family is inviting. And so, as I started to think about my cultural heritage, as I started this whole interview with, I'd always looked to blend these things and extract these things. I thought, you know what? Why not do the same thing here? Because what we're trying to do is, Ramesh is trying to match the Western view, because that's the view I grew up with, and I was really attached to that view. And I had really funny ideas about the Eastern view, because I'd seen a lot of abuse in that system, and I'd seen girls being treated very poorly by their in-laws. And I was like, I'm not going to do that. I'm American. Like, no one's going to tell me to like sleep in the kitchen or like be their slave or whatever. I was like, it's just like one step short of slavery. Like, I'm not doing that, and so I had misconceptions about what that was also. And so I was resisting that. And he was trying, men will do anything for the women they love, right? And he was trying to live up to my dream of what marriage was. And I in that moment, I just offered to Ramesh, as I was going through Tony's program, there was this one intervention that he did that we watched as a training. And in that moment, I said, we need a structure. We need like a framework. And the framework was, why do we need to adopt this version of marriage or that version of marriage? Why can't we just say marriage is an expression? Marriage is an expression of possibilities unfolding, and why can't we, and the possibilities is in the service of a higher power and higher leaders like Perivartata. Our marriage is about serving those higher agendas, those higher leaders. And, literally overnight, the moment we both agreed to this, like our life became, all the arguments like literally stopped overnight, because it wasn't about serving our kids in our way. And, like the kid has to be like this and your way, and your parents' way is like this, and my parents' way is like this, and your way is backward and my way is modern. And there was none of this unnecessary ego clashes. It wasn't about his way or my way. It was about a higher way. It was about the way the scriptures lay out. It was about the way that these self-realized masters, when they talk about unity, it was that way. What are you doing for to nurture the environment of this child's mind, that they will go out and pass on this beautiful succession? What are you doing for that? You're so busy looking at each other and doing these ego battles. Are you doing your duty? You have become parents. Are you cultivating this in the environment of your child's mind? What are you putting in as succession? And the moment we realize this is about service, marriage is about service. It's an intimate connection where you get tested every day. Every last little button that can be pushed will be pushed in marriage. And if you can find the gratitude in that button being pushed, like this is a personality defect that needs to be refined. Thank you, God, for giving me this person who pushed the exact button that will make that refined repetitively. Repetition is the key to mastery. You keep pushing that button. If I make the right choice, I'm going to master that, and it's no longer going to be a button, and having this person who can activate those buttons and who can help me to, shift that, and keeping my eye on a much higher purpose, on a much higher goal. What is my role to serve society? This marriage, how will it help both of us serve God's plan and be instruments of the Lord even more? And once we decided that that was going to be the primary question that drove us, it was easy for us to navigate all the different logistical arguments, all the different vacation planning, how we spent money, how much time we decided to spend together or apart. Every decision became effortless. And so, combined with the work I had done on myself through Tony's work, along with this leadership of our guru, and and deciding that this was going to be like the mission statement of our marriage. And for your listeners, I highly recommend that if you don't have a mission statement for your marriage, you need to have one. A mission statement ignites each of your polarity with each other. It gives you a common vision of what this marriage is about and what's going to come out of this marriage. And I don't know if your audience is generally entrepreneurs or not, but there's Don Miller, who's this amazing entrepreneur who built this program called Story Brand. And even learning he has a lot of free introduction talk on just the overview of Story Brand. When you learn this little introduction of Story Brand, he has this great little thing where he teaches you how to develop guiding principles for your business. When you apply a document like that with a Story Brand kind of point of view, and you write that guiding principles out and you stick it on your fridge with your kids' little scrabbly pictures and everything, and you have that as a beacon of what your marriage is going to be about together, that revolutionizes the marriage. Because just like a company, just like a team, everyone knows what their key characteristics are, what they're driving towards, and why. And what values go behind that, and what daily critical actions will support that vision, and each one. And what's interesting is we expanded that guiding principles to also include our kids, because we said marriage is a unit, it's a team. We created team members, our two little kids. Yes, child labor. Right? Okay. Yeah, and this team, what does it do together? How do we as a team impact the world? My son, he's 14, and we started to introduce these ideas to him. He watched a lot of these things unfold. And today he has his own podcast. He has insane interviews on there with millionaires and entrepreneurs and all kinds of crazy people. He's building his own finance course because he's a wizard with finances. Last year, he grew my portfolio 121%. So he's building, and he serves tweens. And my daughter, she started using my values frameworks, and she developed her own framework, and she's made a little course to teach 7 and 8-year-olds how to go from disliking something to liking something in 6 days. Okay. And she's tried it out on all her friends, and everybody is able to do it. So now she's like, Mommy, can I make a course out of that? I think a lot of your clients as kids could really benefit from that, because it's really hard for us 7, 8-year-olds to get over stuff we don't like. But just see the scope of possibility when you have a shared vision togetger, right? When the family works as a team.
This is excellent. And just before we dive into parenting, I'm really mindful of this. I feel like there's a lot that I can learn, but also that a lot that our listeners can learn from this as well. For quite a while now, I've been facilitating clients through life vision activities, especially when it's a couple, looking at, and also for individuals, and looking at the future and what's the future that they actually want. And the main premise of that has been, yes, it changes their life, but ultimately we got to work. If they come to us for financial advice or help with their finances, what's the point of having a financial plan unless you have a life plan first, right? So do a life plan, and the majority of it is based on the vision, but then also on their mission statement. That's the part I focus on the most, right? What's your mission statement? What's your purpose? If you have a challenge in front of you with property decision, a relationship challenge, whatever it is, like what's the purpose statement that's actually going to be driving your life and the decisions that you make? Like what's the statement? And then what does that statement mean to you, right? Now, I'm
sorry. Are you asking me what mine is, or you're sharing what you want?
No, I'd love to hear yours in a moment. But what I'm even more curious about is there's always this little bit of challenge when you have the couple where both people are willing to make their own mission statement, but where one member of the couple is really hesitant to dive deep and commit to a relationship mission statement. when the couple does commit to a relationship statement, it transforms their relationship, their life, their world. Everything changes for them. But when one isn't fully committed to it, it kind of just doesn't happen. It kind of just evaporates, and like there's always going to be that tension which is there. Uh, your story is really inspiring because the both of you decided to decide on a new mission statement and where you're going. And I'd really love to hear you also talk to the people who are listening to this who are going, my marriage is struggling, but it's kind of just falling on me to try and make it work or make it exceptional, unlock the possibility like Priya's talking about. What steps can I take if my husband isn't as tenacious as Priya's is?
So this is a very involved question, actually.
Yeah.
And I'll try to provide some kind of 10,000-foot perspective, because this is truly an involved question that goes into so many layers of identity and values, and also this feeling that's very common as you're describing of, well, I'm making the changes and my spouse just isn't quite firing at the same place, and I'm not quite sure how to impact or influence the situation. And I think let's start with the mission statement. And I think, like any good team, mission statements cannot be created individually. Like when you're working on a team, if you have good leadership, the critical people at the top of the team, and even if you have really exceptional leadership, even the one layer below the top team will be involved in creating that mission statement. And until everyone is really connected to some part of that mission statement, you don't leave. You all agree to be there, and you make it fun, right? Like we get it whenever we do our mission statement, we update it about once a year, or sometimes once every 2 years, depends. But when we work on it, we kind of create like a Tony Robbins environment, right? Like we have crazy pumping music, and we are all jumping like crazy, and and then we're like unleashing and screaming with primal sounds, and and then we play our Indian, our Indian hymnal type music that's very active and alive, and we're singing the name of the Lord, and we're doing all this, and so in that kind of a state, even your business, right? Like if you sit down and, I've got my little iPad thing here, I'm going to make my mission statement, and I don't know, like I have to hit these targets, and I'm going to hit 10,000 people in this thing. I mean, when you even make your thing for your business in that kind of a state, how can you be open to the possibilities, right? First, we got to free even how we sit down to like have the intention to create this has to have possibility, right? And possibility comes from like unlocking and unleashing some emotions, right? Maybe you do a memory exercise together where you do some gratitude stacking, where you grab some of the most beautiful memories you've had as a family or as a couple, and you visualize them, and you grab them, and you put them in your heart, and then you kind of go around, and everyone chooses a song, and they have to dance like crazy, and then you have to mimic their dancing for like 2 minutes, to their favorite song. And, there's these, I don't know if you've ever read the book, The Culture Code by Daniel Coyle. Have you ever read that?
You recommended it to me a few weeks ago, and it's on my list.
Yes. It's a fantastic book. It's just brilliant because he goes through these studies where he explains that we have these 21 different, it's like the way our primal brain works. We have these 21 different, markers, or I guess I can't recall exactly what he calls them, but they're, in my mind, they're like these little markers that our brain is looking for. And when we checkbox these little markers, like then we decide that we're totally safe and that we belong with this person that we're with, or this group we're with, right? And so there's these 21 things. It's like a little checklist that our brain is looking for, and it does it in seconds. It decides how much of the things are check marked, yeah? And one of the big things about check marking in that, it's such a simple thing. It's nothing sophisticated, it's stuff like, being 2 feet apart instead of being 3 feet apart. Like ridiculously simple things like that. It's nothing like earth shattering, like culture and how to develop teams, nothing earth shattering like that. It would blow your mind how simple it is to get these like safety triggers to get your brain to connect. And here's the other thing, your brain keeps like every half an hour, it like reevaluates those 21 triggers, right? It's a doubting Thomas like all the time. Yeah. So you have to keep those triggers going. But because have you ever been to a meeting where it's like kind of rah at the beginning, and then after that everybody's physiology like drops down, and everybody's like really like whoo, so you got to keep that level of openness and that level of engagement and aliveness and excitement, activity. But we do, and when you connect to someone on their music, and when you mimic them or you do this, there's a bond that's made. It's called matching and mirroring. It's a technique that you may have heard of, like to build rapport and trust, you kind of mimic them. And we do this on purpose. Like everything they do, we do, and we're doing it silly, and we're doing it to music that normally we don't like because it's not the music we listen to, right? It's like that person's favorite music. And in that moment, you realize why they're connected to that music. As you're matching and mirroring them, there are all these triggers in your brain that connect you to the person. And so, we don't just sit down and do the sheet. We create the environment to be ready to do the sheet. And it's interesting, the sheet itself, when you're in that state, the sheet only takes like 15 minutes, but it takes like an hour and a half to set it all up so that you have the right internal and external emotional environment to be able to actually knock that sheet out with openness, right? And trust. And every voice in that meeting matters. My 7-year-old's voice matters in that meeting. My 14-year-old's voice matters in that meeting. Our voices matter in that meeting. And we have enough trust and energy built in that setup to write that stuff out that we can. It's not like, when you free people up that way, they don't come to the table thinking, well, in the past, this has really not worked for me. And like, I'm not really too sure if like this should be the goal. And, like you say you've changed, but like, just this morning, like you almost did that one thing that like we've always talked about. And so now I'm not sure if I can trust you. Like, when you come into working on something like that with a doubtful spouse and you haven't prepared the environment in Montessori, I'm a huge Montessori fan. I'm like a Montessori junkie. In Montessori, they have this phrase called the prepared environment, right? And they spend copious amounts of time preparing the environment for the child. In fact, they spend much less time on like deciding what the lessons are going to be and all that, and way more time on preparing the environment. And so really you have to be, in order to influence someone, you have to have the kind of prepared environment where they allow you in. They allow a moment of trust and connection. Will that sustain past the exercise? No, but now you have the mission statement. So you don't need for it to sustain. You can say, listen, in a moment when you were willing and in a really good state, and I was willing and I was in really good state, and we weren't fearful of anything. Like, see, all those hesitations come from fear, right? We don't want something painful to happen. Our brain is trying to survive, right? It doesn't want to experience pain again. So, in an effort to block the pain, to prevent it from happening, we restrict ourselves from what's possible. Right. And so, in this moment, if you open up this environment and then you can always remind the person and say, listen, the day we made this, you weren't fearful. You weren't trying to avoid pain. You allowed yourself to be in that prepared environment, to expand to your internal capacity. We connected, we bonded, we worked on this as a family, and you came up with this in a beautiful state. So whatever doubts you have right now, that's coming from a place where you are not in a beautiful state. And it's okay to have doubts and worries, but we got to get back clear about what did we write down that day? What is the mission today? Right? And and this is very important. This is very important. When the sheet is for your business, it's totally fine to like regulate it however, but when the sheet is for your marriage, one person, the spouse should never like create an accountability structure. with the other spouse, right? Like, you don't be like, hey, I did my thing. Did you do your thing today? Like, you know how like when we do these kinds of things, like, and we're in a company or something, like we make little accountability groups, and that's usually really helpful and great. Well, that never works in a marriage because if you try to hold each other accountable, well, now you're getting into coaching your spouse, and whatever beautiful openness and trust they offered in that prepared environment where you guys came up with your mission statement together, now they're going to be like, oh, now I know why you created that environment, because like you wanted to use this against me and like hold this over my head and try to regulate me, right? And then some people will say it out loud and some people will just think it, right, and shut down. And so this is a very dangerous thing. You never want to get into accountability. You simply can say something like, have you read our mission statement lately today? It's right over there on the fridge, and I know I need to read it again. I'm going to go take a quick read. If you want to, you can take a quick read too. And it just reminds them the prepared environment, that experience was so beautiful that it anchors them to that experience when they go over to that sheet. And we make a big, how like when you set up your Christmas tree, like everyone, like you don't turn on the lights and you don't put the topper on until everyone is gathered. And then it's like this little moment, right, where you like turn on the lights and you put the topper on. That's the kind of ceremony we like make to put the mission statement on the fridge. It's like that Christmas moment where you're going to turn the lights on and put the topper on, right? And so, we're using neuro-linguistic programming, right, to anchor that memory of like that experience of creating that little ceremonial moment where we like put it there and it was the topper kind of a feeling, that moment, and then it's just an invitation to interact with that anchor, right? That now becomes an NLP anchor. And like now you're interacting with that anchor because it's right there in the middle of your environment. Most people's homes, the kitchen is like right in the middle. So every day you're crossing that thing hundreds of times, right? Every time you open for a snack, you're seeing that thing, And I don't know about your family, but my family is like always in the kitchen eating something,
Look, this is really cool. I didn't expect the conversation to go this way. We haven't even really spoken about parenting yet, and that's the reason I got you on. Which is, I mean, we can try and do a crash course, or maybe we do a part 2. But actually, we will transition to parenting in a moment. Is there anything else which you'd want to share then to someone who's listening to this, who's still thinking my spouse just isn't making the commitments? Either they've got to, like, I'm committed to them, but either they've got to get on board, or they've got to, or it needs to be a different relationship. I mean, what, it'd be that this topic comes up so many times with so many people I speak with that it would be silly. Like I'm taking away time from the parenting part of the conversation, which I'm most excited about, to try and add value to people with this regard. What else would you share?
Okay, I think the moment we have this thought that I'm doing everything and this person just isn't, meeting me halfway or isn't opening themselves, and perhaps this is just the time to exit, or, this isn't really going to change. The first thing I always ask my clients, and I myself do when I'm in this moment where I'm looking at someone as a limited being. See, the moment I think that, I've closed off the possibility of what they can be. The moment I think that, and I say, if I close off who they can be, what am I closing in myself? To encapsulate them, I'm doing something to encapsulate myself. There's constriction there. Like, nobody says from an abundant place of overflowing love, like, you're not showing up, right? No one thinks like that or talks like that when they feel overflowing love. Yes? If I've restricted someone by thinking that means I've restricted myself some way for that thought to even come out. And so in that moment, I rely on something that comes from our Hindu scriptures, which is testing this thought against the 3 G's. The first G is God, which is, what would God say about this situation? Well, what I know about God is that God wants us to have an unlimited experience of life. He wants us to be happy. He wants us to, he or she, whatever you believe, wants us to reach the absolute capacity of our human potential. So if I were to ask God, is this thought in line with what you envision? See, my brain is limited and my body is limited, and sometimes it gets into some programming errors, and this kind of happens. So if I were to go to some place where I could meet God and kind of be like, what would you say about this? Well, I know that he would say, well, thinking that isn't really helping you reach your extreme potential. So it fails the God test. Next, I will ask Guru, my living self-realized teachers. And I may even actually call them or actually go visit them in person. And I would ask them, see, this thought keeps coming up. What do you say about this? And like I'm telling you now, what I'm sharing with you now is what my guru told me, because I did have these thoughts and I did go to him and I did ask this question. Right? And he said, see, you suffer because you want things to be the way you want them to be. And when they're not the way you want them to be, then you suffer. But have you considered that things are the way they need to be because that's the way they need to be? So if you appreciate that this moment is inevitable, and this is all there is, because the past is just a memory of some moment, and the future is some imagination of some other moment. The only thing that's actually really there is right this second, is only what's there. Even after I say this second, it's over. Like, then I'm on to the next second, right?
Yeah.
So if I can truly connect to this idea that this moment is inevitable, it can't be any other way, not as a giving up kind of a thing, not as a like, I quit, I throw my hands up, right? But saying the whole world of possibility exists right now in this moment for me. I can be fully involved with life. I can expand my capacity to reach human potential right now in this moment. And he asked me, this thought in this moment, which is all you have, is this thought going to help you just in this instant expand and reach your human potential? And I was like, no. He's like, okay, then you have your answer, right? And then the third, if these two tests, sometimes they do pass, then the third test is Granth, which in Sanskrit language means scripture. What does the scripture say about this? And all good scripture of every faith will say that this is not a good thought. It doesn't really help you to live up to more noble ideals. And so now when I have tested against my greatest role models, God, my spiritual teachers, and scripture, then I can say, is there another thought that is going to help me reach my potential here? And let's say I were to, just take a little risk and try that thought on. I know it's scary and I know it doesn't feel very comfortable, but what if I were just to try that other thought on in this moment? What would I experience? Would I still see this person as constricted and a problem? Or would I see them totally differently in a way that allows me to change the prepared environment? And if I were to make a pattern of seeing this person only with this new variation of a question over and over and over again, and I never allowed myself to go against the higher truth of that limiting question where I constrict myself to constrict the other person, that doesn't make me reach my highest potential. I know it. So if I don't allow that, if I just repeat the pattern of saying, what is the highest potential? What is the highest potential? and I keep asking that question and I keep viewing the world through that question, what might I find? Now, you might find that that person's nature, how they came into this life, there's a lot of complexity to why a person manifests the way they manifest. And so, we may discover in repeatedly asking this question as we expand ourselves to ask the question and see, we might legitimately observe that I am truly unlimited, but this person has put a constriction on themselves, and at this time, they're not going to be able to release themselves from it. But you see, that doesn't come from a place of you restricting yourself and then trying to say, well, I've fixed myself. What have you done? Right? It doesn't come from that limited place. It comes from a true place of seeing, hearing, feeling, and loving that person as a human, as an entity that is fully capable, just like you, in that moment of reaching their human capacity, which is, to me, the greatest human capacity is the gift of love, right? Where you unleash your heart and you just feel this overwhelming sensation, and it's very hard to explain it, right? It's not like a attachment kind of a love, right? It's like just this, it's almost like you're a mother to the world. It's this feeling of like where you can just hug everyone and you can just really feel other living beings, not just humans. Life itself you can embrace. That's the capacity of humans. Love is the true capacity of humans. But out of fear, we constrict love. And when we constrict these things, we start to believe the logic of like, yes, my constriction is totally valid. It's logical. It makes perfect sense. And look at all the 20 times they did this and they had no respect for me and blah, 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 blah. But if I asked honestly, all of those logical evaluations, though those facts may be true, did they come from your unlimited potential? Did every one of those statements come from a statement of, were you feeling overflowing abundant love as you're making those evaluations? Not a single person would say yes. So in that moment, in order to hold someone else accountable, we dim our own light. We diminish our capacity and we limit our possibilities. And in that moment, at least according to my definition, we're not successful. We've failed because we haven't been able to extend the internal experience to the external, or maybe we're trying to force an internal experience that's not full of choices. And that always happens because of fear. And so when we're just have a tiny bit of courage. You don't even need that much courage. Just a tiny bit of courage to change that question. What is a question? Well, I've done a lot. Why aren't they doing something? That question, if you change that question, then you tap into something. And not only them, but your kids, your coworkers, your in-laws, your brother-in-law, right? The annoying, guy who sits in the cubicle down the way from you. Everybody suddenly becomes a possibility for you. You see everyone as little beautiful forms of possibility. And see, when you see people like that, then it's hard not to fall in love with a person like that.
Yeah.
It's hard not to stretch and do anything for a person like that.
And this is a beautiful note to almost end on, and at the same time segue to parenting, because I've always had this suspicion. You've just helped me clarify it, I guess. I've always had this suspicion that most people really struggle with parenting because of the extent of judgment which they have on their kids, rather than the love that they really want to have for their kids. And your framework, the Peter, is really effective. Can you sum it up in like 5 minutes, 4 or 5 minutes? Are you able to do that?
Yeah. Yes. I think the most important thing here is when we see those situations, which happen very often, of parents judging their kids, they're not actually judging their kids, they're judging themselves. And so one of the ways, and it's really quite heart-wrenching when you see this, because one of the most easy ways to break out of that cycle is to use values as your most effective parenting tool. And we've already discussed what is the definition of values, but it's really going through a systematized way where you can make values central to the way you lead your children. And so there's something called the DOT framework, which helps you connect the dots. And it's not connecting the dots for them. It's connecting the dots for you in your mind so that you don't, have these funny little questions and sentences that come out of fear running the ship. Right. And so the DOT framework has 3 steps, and there's a silent P in front of it. So it's really P dot, but we don't really talk about the silent P. But the silent P is all about parenting yourself. And so this whole thing I've described, even though we were talking about marriage, it's the same when we judge our kids. But you want to know what's funny? When we judge in marriage, we know that person's an adult. We hold them responsible and accountable, like to take action or change something. But when we look at a kid, we're not judging them because like the same way we judge an adult. We judge a kid because we're afraid that if they don't take some certain steps or learn certain things, they're going to fail in life. They're going to experience suffering. They're going to have pain. Like they're maybe going to have marriage that isn't beautiful and open and full of polarity, and they're not going to have any friends. And, it's just like doomsday, right? They're not going to be prepared for the future. They're not going to have all the opportunities. So it's kind of even more intense because it's not just like trying to hold another adult accountable. There's intense fear that under your watch, this person's going to become a total failure, right? And more than them being a failure under your watch, it's like, and they're going to go through incredible suffering in life, right? And as a parent, you will do anything to reduce that. And so, P is really about parenting yourself, checking these stories, these narratives, just like in the marriage story. Like, is that the right question to ask? Like, are you really focusing on the right emotion within yourself? Right? Are you holding the right value to lead this person to victory? Or are you trying to lead them from a constricted place of fear, of all of your paranoias, of how dangerous and harmful the world is and how much pain it's caused you? And you want to try to prevent that pain as much as possible, right? Then you move into D, which is deepening your understanding of the values. This is the step where you have taken care of yourself. You stepped into the field of wherever your child is or children are, and you're simply looking for what is their action, what is their energizing emotion, if they even have one. Maybe they don't have a value running in that moment. Maybe they just have an action with an emotion, but it's not an energizing emotion. So it's simply being aware, is a value even running in this moment? Can I deepen my understanding of if a value is running in this moment? Deepening your understanding of value, the D step, is really being able to look at it and say, what are the 2 parts of value? What's running here in front of me? Without concluding anything. You're just making a hypothesis at this point. Then, with your hypotheses in place, like you're seeing some actions, there's some possible emotions that you may be able to name, but you can't be sure. You can't be sure. How successful have you been looking at someone else and knowing exactly, like naming to the exact level what emotion somebody else is having, right? You can say, well, I think they might be sad or something, but what if it's melancholy? Melancholy is very different than sad. You can't really know that. You can only know, oh, it's kind of a category of sad, but if they turn around and say, it's not sad, I'm melancholy, right? If they turn around and said that to you, that's a whole nother set of information, right? So you kind of can make some guesses, but when you go to O, what you're doing is you're opening a dialogue, not having a conversation. A conversation is one way. You have some hypothesis, you spew out what your hypothesis is to them, and you try to redirect them and help them move along. Okay, that's not the same. With a dialogue, okay, and that's what O is all about. It's about opening a dialogue. It's about you saying, well, I can see there's all these actions going on. I can see that some kind of emotions is going on, and I'm just curious. Like what I'm able to see is that these are the emotions you seem to be feeling right now. Is that true? And then at that moment, the child will be like, no, that's not true. Why are you saying that? Like, I just want to keep doing this action because it's fun to bonk my sister over the head over and over again. She makes this funny noise when you bonk her over the head. And I like to hear that noise. Therefore, I'm going to bonk her over the head. Right? And you realize in that moment, it's not because it's some sophisticated like emotion. It's a moment of just like a little pleasure. Okay, this is an emotion of like a little pleasure signal, right? Like, okay, what if I just made that noise without you bonking on her head? Would that be okay? Right? And this is when you move into the T step, which is tailoring an experience based on this dialogue. Now you have enough information about helping them craft their value, helping them develop an emotional home, right? You're leading from a place of your potential, and now you're tailoring that experience and you're just walking around going boop, 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 whatever the sound was that the sister made every time she got bonked on the head. And now you find yourselves, all three of you, rolling on the floor, laughing your head off. And forever after that, even when they turn 14, forever after that, when you say boop, everyone rolls off laughing. Because what T did was tailor an experience that becomes a memory that anchors that value for life. And so that's really what the DOT framework is about, and what it means to live a values mindset and how to build success, this internal and external experience in a very simple and, repeatable way. This system was created. It might just sound like a step-by-step process, but it's actually a framework. There are over 17 different relationships that have been gone deep into to uncover the nature of those relationships. And this process comes out of years, almost 3 years of reflection on the nature of those relationships and how to bring those elements into your parenting. And it's literally from the absolute best Western peak performance discipline people and the best Eastern integrated knowledge systems for character development, fusing almost 3 decades of knowledge and immersion, fusing that together into this new style called values mindset parenting, and executing that through the DOT framework so you can connect the dots so that when you're done with this life, what you've left as a succession is this beautiful pattern. In India, and I'll close with this, we have this beautiful thing called a kolam. A kolam is a design drawn in South India. Every morning, the women come outside freshly bathed, and they hold in their hand a little stainless steel box. And in that box, there is rice flour. And they pick up the rice flour, and they with their fingers, they draw these little dots. And then they draw this little line that connects, this one line, weaves and goes around and interweaves. And when they're done, and it only takes them like 15, 20 minutes to do this, when they're done and they stand up, there is this magnificent design on the floor. Sometimes it's just a pattern that's a design. Sometimes it represents something, a flower, a temple tower, Lord Ganesha, the elephant face god. Like these women, they create these kolams. And the point of creating this kolam is it's made of rice flour. One, it's this beautiful, inviting mat that welcomes people into your home. The rice flour feeds thousands of insects. It's an act. It's an act of starting your day with service. Feeding somebody with service. And it is a moment of meditative calm where this one line connects all these dots. And that one line is whatever drives your life. For me, that line is God, is my gurus, and is my values. And so as this line is drawn, I realize that line that connects everything is values. And so, the DOT experience is really this beautiful tradition of creating a kolam. It's a kolam experience for your children to make these magnificent patterns that mean something. And when you're done, you look up and down the street, every day this happens at 6:30 in the morning. You look up and down the street and not one kolam is the same, but they're all magnificent. And you can walk up and down the street and see the beauty of this. And that is what we're trying to do through our parenting. We're trying to create these patterns that other people can enjoy by interacting, a welcoming pattern, a pattern that serves, a pattern that makes you live in alignment to your highest purpose and allows you to reach your highest potential.
That's exceptional. And normally what I do at the end of these conversations is I give like a full summary of everything which you've shared, and there's no way that I can do that in just a few moments. So for the benefit of the people listening, to be able to take away something, because they might be listening to this while they're on a commute, they might be listening to it while they're driving or running or on their bike, and they can't remember exactly, like, oh my god, there was a lot of really awesome stuff in there, I should go back and listen to it. But just something to take away with, or the really key parts that I took from you. It's only a few if I try and really drill it down. Is you're very clear on your definition of success, or a successful life, which is expressing life and creating these internal and external experiences, providing an unlimited or infinite or a amount of choices. And we spoke a lot about what the external and the internal actually means, but most importantly, and this is the part which I think has really driven in every area of your life, your emphasis on your work, your connection with what you've done in terms of your dancing and your career and going into Tony Robbins, and your marriage and your parenting and your connection with your brother and your parents and your in-laws, and everything is this idea of values, which you defined as any action or thought or speech or physical activity or anything that makes an energizing emotion may feel even bigger to you. And we spoke a lot about what energizing is and de-energizing, and the sugar rush of anger that can get you to do things. And they're all just fuel sources. What fuel do you actually want to drive your life with? And then how does that fuel impact and influence all the areas around you, so that you can actually have infinite choices, and so that you can also empower others as part of succession to be able to have those beautiful experiences as well. And this was an amazing conversation for me, because I did not expect it to go all the way that it went through, and it almost became a parenting episode a relationship episode rather than a parenting episode. So I don't even know what I'm going to title this conversation. But thank you for your time. You've shared a lot of wisdom, a lot of exceptional insight, which I hope will be really, really impactful for our listeners. Is there, I got to give you this opportunity, is there anything else which you wanted to share off the back of what I just said and off the back of the last 2 hours plus of conversation?
I think that you said you wouldn't be able to summarize that whole thing, and I think you did a fantabulous job of summarizing that whole thing. I always leave my clients with just one simple phrase, which sums up everything we talked about today. And that phrase is this: live life inspired. Live life by choice, not chance. And I think when you think about that statement, you'll notice it's a nice little aphorism of everything that this talk was really about.
Perfect note to end it on. Thank you, Priya. So I hope you received a whole lot of value from engaging in that conversation. What were the key takeaways for you? What can you schedule in your life right now to make sure that the time you just invested into listening to this exceptional conversation with this amazing mentor and this amazing individual is time that wasn't misused, but was time that you've allocated properly to enhancing your life and improving it? Whatever it is, schedule it now, practice it now, be the successful person you're meant to be, live with purpose.